The inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
The dream of the big payoff for gamblers and governments from casino gambling has been the dream of some Ohioans for decades. On November 3rd, for the fifth time in 3 decades, Ohio voters will have the opportunity to approve a casino gambling proposal. Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. Since 1990, pro-gambling interests have asked Ohio voters to approve a casino in Lorain, floating casinos for Lake Erie, 31,500 slot machines at casinos in Cleveland and the state's racetracks, and in 2008, last year, a single casino in Wilmington, Ohio. This year's proposal, Issue 3, proposes that 4 major casinos, each worth $250 million, will be built across the state, one in each of Cleveland, Toledo, Columbus, and Cincinnati. 2 of the casinos are assigned to Dan Gilbert, the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, and 2 to Penn National, the owner of the Hollywood Casino in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Those operators will pay an initial fee of $50 million for each casino and an ongoing basis, 33% of their revenue in taxes, annual taxes. The ballot proposal spells out how the resulting taxes will be distributed to local governments, including school systems throughout the state. To discuss Issue 3, I am joined this morning by Charlie Luken, the former mayor of Cincinnati, who's one of the leaders of the Issue 3 campaign, and Tyrone Yates, a member of the Ohio House of Representatives from Hamilton County, a former Cincinnati City Council member. Mr. Yates is active with Truth PAC, an organization opposed to Issue 3, which is funded in part by MTR Gaming, a West Virginia-based firm that has been frozen out of the Issue 3 deal. Charlie, Tyrone, welcome back to Newsmakers in both cases. Charlie, what makes, and we can't talk about all the elements of this issue this morning, what makes this issue better than any of those earlier 4 issues that have been put before the voters?
Well, the jobs that are created, Dan, I think people in Ohio are tired of seeing those jobs go to other surrounding states. We're now almost surrounded by people who allow casino gambling or gambling of some kind, and we estimate 19,000 construction jobs, 15,000 permanent jobs, not including all ancillary jobs. Getting the $1.5 billion that we currently spend in other states back into Ohio, working for Ohioans. 64% of the money that goes to West Virginia is from Ohio. 63% of the money that goes to Indiana is from Ohio. And I think people have seen this long enough now that they're ready to step up and say, it's time for Ohio to get into the gambling business.
And to be perfectly honest, the economic situation that we're in right now drives this in a different way.
Well, if you look, Ohio loses jobs is a headline that we see every month. And for somebody to say Ohio's going to get thousands of jobs, I think that helps at the polls quite a bit.
Tyrone, why is this not a good deal? Even this one, why is this not a good deal for Ohio?
Well, Ohioans, of course, every day are increasingly seeing that, but the reason why is that as you indicated in the setup, is that the casino industry itself wrote and designed the constitutional amendment, and thereby they set the terms for their own deal, and that's why it's a bad deal. The casinos designing their own casino plan.
You, in fact, have introduced legislation, am I right, to change that sort of process so this doesn't happen by constitutional amendment?
Well, it has to happen by constitutional amendment because the Constitution requires that if gambling is to occur in Ohio, it has to be constitutionally provided for. But a citizen gave the idea in one of the forums that Congressman Luken and I have, why doesn't the state take responsibility by authorizing gambling and then authorizing the legislature to set the terms for the deal? This one is a bad deal, and we think that the casino issue is now underwater. We believe it's below 50% and is likely to fail on Election Day.
Well, that's the horse race question, which we don't deal with here because we're trying to look at the issues. Let's take a look at some of those arguments that have been made against this, and I want to come back and have you. The argument is that because Issue 3 was written by casino interests, that as Tyrone was just saying, they have written it in a way that doesn't favor the state. So for example, the initial license fee in Ohio is $50 million, as we mentioned, but in Illinois, the initial license fee when a competitive situation was $400 million. In Indiana, $250 million in 2007 for a couple of racetracks who bid on casino gambling. And the tax rates, in Ohio it's going to be 33%. Sounds big, but Pennsylvania, it's 55%, and in New York it's 57%. So the argument here, Charlie, is that we would have been better off to have done this competitively and let people bid on how much they're willing to pay.
Let's talk about it. First of all, the Pennsylvania example is just not applicable. It's only slot machines. And their rate for casino gambling that they're talking about in Pennsylvania, they're going to introduce table games, is about 11%. We have the 4th highest tax rate for states with casino table games in the country. And our per gambling unit return to Ohio investors will be the 2nd highest in the country. I understand why our opposition comes from the state legislature. They authorized gave 7 racetracks a monopoly, and they wanted to put a bunch of slot machines at racetracks to fill a gap that they had in their budget. They want the money to go to Columbus. Our proposal puts money in cities and counties. That's why the mayor, the city council, the county commissioners, the sheriff.
Does any of it go to Columbus? Does any go to the state general fund?
It goes to the licensing fee. Let me talk about the licensing fee. These guys want a big licensing fee because these racetracks won't have a capital investment. We have pledged $250 million in construction. That's why the building trades, the UAW, the AFL-CIO have endorsed us, because we're putting it into jobs, and these guys want to put it into these slot machines that are not going to create the capital investment, not going to create the jobs, not going to do the kind of things that Ohioans really want done.
Tyrone, what about that? I mean, is this just who gets the money, and the state legislature would like to see it coming to Columbus?
Well, certainly the state has a major responsibility for a local and local government funds, for libraries, those kinds of things. So to the extent that the general government for which the state is responsible designs the plan, then those areas benefit. But I think the concessions that the other side have made about the licensing fee, I think that really is the issue.
The $50 million,
the $50 million
is too low?
It's too low. We'll concede perhaps that, let's say that the return might be okay, but it's
33%.
33%,
okay.
But it's indisputable that this license fee at $50 million, which is non-competitive, and this new plan we think creates kind of a monopoly, is bad. Now the other thing is that he talks about mayors who are supportive of this. Both Ohio United States senators, the governor of the state, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, and just recently, the largest city in Columbus, its own chamber of commerce, says that this plan, which would benefit them, the chamber of commerce says this is the wrong plan for Ohio. What about that, Charlie?
Dan, our chamber of commerce has endorsed it. Our Convention and Visitors Bureau has endorsed it. The Convention and Visitors Bureaus of every city we're involved in have endorsed it, with the exception of Columbus, which is neutral. And at the end of the day, you know, this is really not about what muckety-mucks endorse it or don't. It's about the merits of the proposal, and it's about whether Ohio voters are tired of seeing this money go to foreign. And let me make one more point. You made it in the opening. Every commercial, every single one that people see against Issue 3 is being paid for by a guy that owns a West Virginia casino. Now that speaks volumes about what this campaign's about.
But to be fair, in last year's campaign, all of that anti-issue, whatever it was last year, the one for Wilmington, that was being paid for largely by Penn National, who is now part of this project.
Absolutely.
So a year ago, it would have been that criticism.
Right, but the tax rate of that was 15%, and they got it back in a tax credit, which is just a rotten plan.
What about this initial license fee of $50 million? Let's leave the tax rate aside. Tyrone was willing to concede that. What about the $50 million being too low?
As I indicated, we're guaranteeing $250 million capital investment in each one of these. If you're putting slots at a racetrack, you're not going to spend that kind of money. The reason the building trades unions are so excited about this is nobody spent $1.5 billion in Ohio without a government subsidy, as far as I know, in my lifetime.
One of the questions that has been raised is That's the promise of a $250 million casino in each of these 4 cities. But there isn't a guarantee that once this passes, that these companies will have to go ahead and build it.
Let's concede for the moment that they would. I'm no mathematician, but Charlie says that we'll gain $1 billion. What about the almost billion that we're going to lose from the beginning by not having the licenses competitively bid? Pennsylvania, $450 million. Think two licenses would be $900 million that we're losing right from the start.
Well, Ty, I think we've been dealt with that issue, and the answer is you guys want to put a bunch of slot machines under the grandstand of racetracks and generate as much revenue as you can so that you can plug this big budget hole you have. And I get that. I get that. We're all motivated by kind of what helps us. But what the voters want is money that goes to their local communities, local schools, local counties, and I think
what happens to right now the idea of putting the slots at the racetracks ended up getting challenged and it's now in the courts. What will ultimately happen to that if this passes? Would it be possible for that also to go in effect so that we'd end up with slots at the racetracks plus the 4 casinos?
Well,
yes.
Yes. Unfortunately, some of the econometric studies show that Ohio is such a vast state that it could absorb both. My hope is that the slots do not come back, that this proposal is tossed, and that the legislature adopts my constitutional amendment, which would let the public. Don't you think that the public ought to design the gambling proposal rather than a group of casino owners?
The public did design this one, Ty. We asked 3,000 Ohioans what kind of a plan they wanted. And this is the plan that they told us they didn't want the high licensing fee. They wanted the money in the ground. They told us they wanted a fair tax rate. And they told us they wanted the money to go to local communities. Now, I respect the fact that you guys would rather see it go to Columbus. And if people want to have slots at the racetracks, that's fine with us. And you say let the people decide, that's what we're doing.
Well, let me get at one other thing, too. In each of these cities, there's a designated property where this would probably go. In this city, it's up. Oh, I'm just blank.
Broadway Commons.
Broadway Commons. Is that a deal that's already done?
Yes. It's in the amendment, because here's the thing. We found out people want to know exactly what they're going to get. If they don't know exactly what they're going to get in the amendment, what happens is people like Tyrone and his ilk will pick it apart. So we've designed it with very specific language. Now, as mayor for 12 years, I tried all the time to get something going at Broadway Commons, and I think it's the perfect site for Cincinnati to get that part of the city moving, to do something with that site and have a good effect on the neighborhood around it.
Tyrone, how do you feel about the impact of a casino in Broadway Commons, basically on the edge of downtown, next to over the Rhine? Your district is inside the city limits. What do you feel about the way this would play out in Cincinnati? Is this the right use for that property?
Well, I think that if it passed, I think that that's a fine use for it.
Okay.
The question is whether the surrounding areas, in other words, if we have the casino there with the big liquor licenses, with the restaurant tour activity, will this draw off of Bootsy's? Will it draw off the precinct? Will it draw off of our other places around Fountain Square? Probably for the city, probably not for those who might come to the city. But I think still an open question is, why would the largest city's Chamber of Commerce that was going to benefit one near their arena district, why they would say that this was a bad deal for Ohio? Can you answer that, Charlie?
Well, Cleveland said yes, Cincinnati said yes, Toledo said yes, Cleveland said no.
Columbus said no.
Columbus said no. So we're 3-1. And I think that, let me talk for a minute about the issue of drawing off, because this is an argument they use. We're going to create...
I don't think I used that argument this morning.
Well, you said you're going to draw stuff to Bootsy's, from Bootsy's in the precinct.
Well, certainly all the studies have shown that. Lawrenceburg is a perfect example.
No, not at all, but let me talk about it. This is not a zero-sum game. And by that I mean we're adding 6 million visitors to the state of Ohio and about 2 million visitors to Cincinnati, Ohio. That's why the Chamber of Commerce said yes. That's why the Convention and Visitors Bureau said yes. We're not building a hotel.
Right.
And we're not building a hotel because we want the occupancy of the existing hotels in downtown to fill up before we build.
Do you have an option of a future hotel, though?
We have an option, but we have pledged, and that's why these people, we're working with our chamber, our Convention and Visitors Bureau, and that's why they've endorsed us.
Well, of course, the truth is, and I think you have to be honest about this, is that the proposers will tell you anything. They've spent $30 million. They're dropping money from the sky at this point. Every organization and that they can get their hands on are trying to sort of get into this.
I want to deal with one last issue
Sure.
before we run out of time. Issue 3 campaign proponents are touting this as a job creation measure. They cite a study conducted by the University of Cincinnati, which they paid for, that Issue 3 will create 34,000 jobs. That's 19,000 construction jobs to build 4 casinos, 7,500 permanent jobs split between the employees of casinos themselves and the companies that casinos may contract with for goods and services. So, Ty, let's start with you. Is 34,000 a number that you believe, trust?
I'll concede I trust the number.
Okay.
Except the first 19,000, as Charlie will have to concede, are temporary 2-year construction jobs. And since construction is cyclical, I'll concede that. On the next 14,000 jobs that are permanent, I think there are some studies that indicate that that's not a net creation of new jobs. You may take someone from McDonald's or from a hotel or from another industry that comes and works in the casino, but not create another job that they left. I think that's a fair analysis.
Let me deal with it real quickly. I think the number is actually much higher, but let me give you the jobs we don't include.
I concede the numbers, and then now he says
Well,
the
I'm
numbers.
going to tell you about the jobs we haven't added in. Cincinnati's going to get $21 million a year. Hamilton County's going to get 12, and that's going to happen all across the state in every county and school district. The jobs we haven't counted are those cops and those firefighters and those sanitation workers down the line that are going to keep their jobs in cities like Cincinnati because they're getting this revenue.
So in effect, I mean, to take another analogy, this is stimulus. This is a stimulus project that comes from a different angle.
Well, here's the real serious side, and that is that even though no side in terms of the funders are wearing white hats, those who are groups like the League of Women Voters that opposes this. The entire faith community, the church of your own faith, opposes Issue 3, Charlie.
Well,
how do you answer that?
Oh, I'd love to answer that. They want
this is the Roman Catholic opposition.
The
church of your own faith.
The church of my own faith, they like those festivals. I grew up at the festivals, and I campaigned at a lot of them in my life, and they kind of enjoy it. So they'd like to keep it going, but the truth of the matter is the church opposes it because of a fantasy that your side has perpetrated that we're going to have an impact on church festivals, which all the legal analysis says we will not.
No, that's not why they oppose it. They oppose it because gambling is a pursuit that takes money away and does not improve the overall life of the people of Ohio.
You voted for a budget that had 20,000 slot machines.
And I'm thrilled that the Supreme Court threw it out.
Okay. All right. We could go on.
Yes, we could.
But we're not going to. Thank you very much. This is the thing we're going to watch on election night because this is going to determine a lot of things in the future. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Stay tuned after the break. Issue 6, the levy to support the Cincinnati Museum Center. Blockbuster exhibits like Dinosaurs Unearthed this past summer, in combination with 3 permanent museums, an OmniMax theater, and an excellent research library, recently resulted in the center being awarded the 2009 National Medal for Museums and Library Service. Welcome back. Issue 6 this year is a renewal and decrease, you don't hear that often, of the existing tax levy to support Cincinnati Museum Center at Union Terminal, a building that is owned by the city of Cincinnati. Issue 6 proposes a levy of 0.18 mils, which is a decrease of 0.02 mils from the current levy, which was adopted in 2004. The new rate would mean that for every $100,000 of residential or commercial property you own, you will pay $4.43 per year. That would be down from the current $4.93. The funds raised from the levy over the next 5 years would go to the cost of operating, maintaining, and repairing Union Terminal. It is also important to point out that the bond issue that passed in 1986 to renovate Union Terminal for the Museum Center has been paid off as of this year and will no longer appear on local tax bills. Clearly, I have a giant conflict of interest on this topic. I was the Assistant Vice President for History and Research at the Museum Center from 2004 until 15 months ago. And you may, as viewers, want to know that, of course, you might presume that I favor this levy. I want to make clear that I'm not expressing any opinion here. On the other hand, while I was employed there, I had to sign an agreement that I could not use any inside information with any questions I asked. That still holds true. That means I cannot ask any question that a typical reporter could not ask. Although originally I was not going to do this interview because of an announcement I want to make personally at the end of the program, I decided to conduct the interview and make clear my conflict of interest. I am joined now by Ruby Rogers, the director of the Cincinnati Historical Society Library and curator of Union Terminal. When I was at the Museum Center, Ruby reported to me. Ruby, welcome to Newsmakers.
Thank you, Dan.
Different role here.
Yes.
Ruby, one of the things we were pointing out is that, one, this levy is relatively small and is actually a reduction. Why is this levy important to the Museum Center?
The levy provides absolutely essential funds for the repair and maintenance of Union Terminal. It doesn't go for programming or exhibits at Museum Center. It really is to make sure that we preserve Union Terminal, this incredible building, for future generations.
Now, one of the things from 5 years ago when this passed, there was a projection of what it was going to cost to do the maintenance and preservation of Union Terminal. That number has gone up significantly in those years, and 6 months ago, the Museum Center was asking for a real increase in this levy. So if you now actually have to live with a reduction, are you going to be able to maintain that building?
We can certainly maintain it with the current funding if the voters of Hamilton County vote yes on issue 6. What will not happen with this level of funding is additional restoration of the building. You're absolutely right. That's going to take a lot more money.
And when we're talking about the needs of that building, they're not just small needs. It's not just repainting and things. You're talking about major, in terms of what that building ultimately needs.
What has happened over the last 5 years, since the levy was passed in 2004, is an extensive study of the entire building. And what we have learned is that over the 76 years, water has leaked into the building and really damaged the structural steel. And so we need to repair and in some cases replace that structural steel.
Which is the sort of thing that costs lots of money and visitors will never see.
They won't
because
see.
It's inside the building, so it's very hard to understand
Right.
what that's about. Question I always have to ask with these levy issues, if this didn't pass, what does it mean for the Museum Center?
It will be very sad, and there will have to be some changes. I don't know what those changes are. Certainly senior management has thought about it, although we're all quite optimistic that it will pass, but there will be changes.
5 years ago, when this was on the ballot for the first time, there was a promise there would be the issue in 2004, and then it would go back on the ballot one more time, which is now this year, and that would be it. Is this the last time the Museum Center will come to voters and asking for levy support?
You're right. Museum Center made that commitment. I think there could well be other things that are needed in the future, but it is my understanding that in 5 years we're not going to be coming back asking for a renewal.
Renewal of this levy.
Right.
It could be packaged in a different way.
It could well be packaged. We're looking at all sorts of things to enable the preservation of the building, private funding, foundation, funding at different government levels, state and federal.
One last question, because we're basically out of time. why can't a museum that draws so many people, 1.3 million, why can't you do it just on what people pay to get into the various museums or special exhibits?
Those funds, and our budget is based really on our earned income, the tickets, membership, what the gift shop brings in. It's about 65% of our budget, and that's an incredible percentage for a museum, but it simply is not enough to maintain this monumental icon.
Might also a monumental icon from the 1930s, which was not built with modern structures. So thank you very much for being here. We'll be watching this on election night. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Next week, Democratic Mayor Mark Mallory and Republican challenger Brad Wenstrup. I want to thank all the people who have watched Newsmakers here on Local 12 for the last 14 years and let you know that in 2 weeks, not next week, in 2 weeks we will be moving from Local 12 to our sister station, Local 12.2, the CW Cincinnati. That's Channel 20 on Time Warner Cable and Channel 25 on Insight Cable and DirecTV. Have a good week. Remember, recent programs can be found at our website on local12.com, and stay with us for next week's show right here with the mayors. Thank you.